Today on Silent Voices, I would like to introduce our guests. Please welcome Judy Hodges.
Thank you.
Hi, Judy. How are you?
I'm okay today.
I heard a little bit of your story from when we were talking, but it's really sad, and I apologize for everything that you've been forced to go through. What is your grandson's name?
His name is Deshaun,
Okay.
and we call him Josiah, which is his middle name,
Okay.
and Hodges. And yeah, it has been really heartbroken to know that he was taken from us over 3 years ago and placed in foster care. Recently I heard that he was adopted, and he's been gone from us now close to 4 years, but I'm just hearing now that he was adopted.
So when you say adoption, just to clarify for our viewers, when you state he was adopted, he was actually adopted by the paternal grandmother?
Yes.
Okay. Now, just a quick question. Did you attempt to pursue adoption so that your grandson could stay in your care?
Yes, I did. And I was not granted the same opportunity as the other grandparent. I was so disappointed because I knew that I had no criminal background and that I was very bonded with my grandson. And once I presented myself to the adoption agencies over in Lansing, Michigan, and also to Protective Services, I thought they would at least give us equal rights, that I could have stayed bonded with my grandson. Our family, who loves him as well, wanted to stay bonded because it was not just me. It was his cousins and, you know, his nieces and nephews. We all loved him, and we wanted him to stay with our family. And there were for many good reasons we wanted that to happen.
Right.
My daughter had issues with the father, you know, and my daughter had a very serious illness, MS, with multiple sclerosis. She also was diagnosed with hyperthyroidism. But at the same time, she was being abused by this young man, and it was just really hard on her trying to take care of her son and just live, you know, have a good home for him. So me and her together worked together as mom and daughter to try to make sure he was provided well, that, you know, he was in good health. I made sure his welfare and his health was good. I made sure that he went to doctors and got his checkups and his immunizations. So I worked with my daughter because I knew that she had this illness.
Right.
And
So Josiah was not neglected or abused or anything like that in your care?
No, he wasn't ever. And that's what was sad to know, that when she took my grandson to the paternal grandmother's house to watch him one day, that all of a sudden she couldn't get him back. And they kept him, and from that day on, he hasn't been back with her. Although we went through the hearings and the different trials that were set up for us to go to, nothing was ever told how he was, the paternal grandmother was really babysitting him.
Right.
And then they just took him, you know.
Now, I understand that, and your daughter's name is Judy as well.
Yes.
I understand that Judy had was made a promise that if she were to sign the child over, that she would get to see him on a daily basis and she would be an active part in her son's life.
Yes. That is what the paternal grandmother and also the father
Now, did
of
the
my
caseworker also tell you that?
um the caseworker never told me that pertaining to my daughter, but she did tell me at one point, along with the paternal grandmother, that I would have access to seeing him all the time. That the paternal grandmother said she would never prevent me from seeing him.
Right. So you had no reason to anticipate that you would be taken out of this young boy's life altogether.
That's true. And you know, I felt that I should have had the same opportunity as this grandparent because I am the maternal grandparent. And I was hoping that me and her would have a good rapport and be able to share our grandson like most grandparents do.
Right.
But later on, she just reassured me that none of that was going to happen, that I was not going to be allowed to see him anymore. So that has been devastating for me.
Oh, I bet. I'm sure.
Very devastating.
That would be awful for any parent or grandparent. That's a tough situation to be in. I understand that you were in front of Judge Beard, and this is in Lansing. And what did he have to say about you as, in regards to you taking care of your grandson?
Well, I did get a chance to speak with Judge Beard, in which she is a woman.
Okay.
And I was able to stand there and give a brief description of how I felt about my grandson being taken away. I also talked with the judge to make her aware that this bond is what I wanted to keep between me and my grandson. Mm-hmm. That he, even visiting him while he was placed with protective services, that he continued to ask them to go home with me. He would cry, mm-hmm. and he would beg me to come to take him home. And so when I addressed all that to Judge Beard, she did send me a letter and said that I was credible, but I didn't have enough merits.
Do you know what she meant by merits?
No, I didn't. I really was just really surprised because I didn't understand what the merits were, but to say I was credible made me feel like, that I should have had the same opportunity as the other grandmother.
Right, and that sounds very, vague to say that you don't have enough merits when in fact you had been raising this child with his mother
for
since
3
birth.
years. Yes,
So,
for 3 years.
When is the last time that you were able to see Josiah?
I saw him on Valentine's Day of last year, and I went to the paternal grandmother, and I had to really beg her to see him. And when I say beg, I literally stood at that door probably about a good half an hour, just reassuring her that, me and her could have a good rapport, and that if she didn't want me to see him, at least let me see him from time to time.
Right.
I brought gifts for her and her family as well as my grandson. And when I speak of gifts, it was Valentine's Day, so I made sure I brought enough cards for her grandchildren that is her maternal grandchildren to have along with my grandson. I brought fruit to her home.
This sounds so much like my producer's story. He went through the same thing, and they did everything to try to be a good example on,
I did.
you know, for the grandchildren, even though there's a separation there, it's really important to keep healthy boundaries.
Yes.
Now, just a quick question, and I already know the answer to this, but had you ever threatened or raised your voice to or treated poorly the paternal grandmother in this case?
No, and I would never have done that because I felt that to be around my grandson, me and her should have a good rapport. I felt like there was no reason to be rude to her or disrespectful. So that was never an issue coming from me. And I think that also puzzled me on why she would not want me to see him. You know, I was just really surprised because us being both grandparents, most grandparents, I'm a grandmother to other grandchildren.
Right.
And I don't have that problem with the other grandparents. So I'm still puzzled to this day on why she felt like she has to keep them away from me. And I feel like the the agencies should look into this and give me an opportunity to visit with my grandson just to make sure he's in good health.
Right. And part of that is knowing what your rights are, because it sounds like, you know, we all start out not knowing about the system and what they're capable of. And
Yes.
it's especially difficult when you trust them, when you go into this trusting them and you really get blindsided, you know, with what takes place. Can you just explain to us a little bit about, you know, you said your daughter is having issues with multiple sclerosis.
Yes.
And as well as the thyroid disorder, which can really, you know, I used to work in the mental health field and the medical field, and that's a really tough one because thyroid issues can throw off other things in your body as well.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the limitations that she had when your grandson was living with you, and, you know, potentially how the stress of losing her son has attributed to what her limitations are now?
Well, she has been diagnosed now with heavy depression. When he was with me, a lot of times it was because she was going blind. Right at this point, she is partially blind. She's had issues with just adapting to losing the boyfriend, that the baby's father, the abuse he inflicted on her. Just she hasn't been able to really get established.
Right.
And so as a mom, I was doing my best to help her as well,
Yeah.
you know, because of her illness, and at the same time trying to work with her and also work with the court system, protective services, the adoption agency.
Yeah.
Has been a lot for me.
Right. And
But-
part of the reason I emphasize that is because I know, you know, I can only go from my personal experience and the women and children that I work with, but after
Yes.
losing my son, I had a massive heart attack, 100% blocked. And, you know, the stress does unbelievable damage to, you know, both yourself and your daughter, anybody that's in
can
this
imagine.
situation. You're not made to be in that constant fight or flight situation. It releases chemicals that ages you faster than, you know, the average, and, you know, that puts you in a tough situation
Yes.
and makes anything that you have even worse. Now, what is some of the abuse that your daughter faced while she was in the relationship with this father?
Well, it was a lot of verbal abuse, physical abuse. I remember once I had to actually tell her to give me the baby because he was punching her. And I just thought that was just horrible, that she couldn't even put her baby down.
Right.
So when I saw him I told him he had to leave. You're in my home. You cannot fight my daughter. And then how dare you hit a woman and then with a child in her hand?
Right.
And the things that he said to me, I really don't want to repeat on television, but they were so vulgar.
Right. And I just real quick want to interject in here that both Dennis and myself feel that abuse a lot of times is really not seen for what it is. We're taught from society to stay the fighting going on, and that's not really what's taking place. And you just said that too, and I can relate because I used to say the same thing. It's not fighting when one party is being abused and the other is not.
Yes.
Even if your daughter is trying to verbally get him to stop, she cannot stop the conflict because it is really, you know, as long as she's not punching him, it's not fighting. This is abuse. And I just want to call it out as what it is rather than making both parties equally responsible in the
Right.
situation.
Right.
And that's common for all of us to do.
Yes, but of course she couldn't have been fighting at him because she had the baby in her arms.
Right.
But his attitude with her seemed, it was very like everything triggered an attitude with him
Right.
about her. And at one point when he denied her child and he never established a DNA or ever signed a birth certificate, then we did have questions. Is this really the father?
Right.
He said he wasn't the father at one point. So it just was so many things that was going on. And then for the child to end up being taken away.
Right.
And just, you know, just, it was like I was made the enemy to me because I'm the grandparent. Why should I be deprived of spending time and keeping that bond that we had for 3 years?
Okay. And one more thing I wanted to ask you about, being that the paternal grandmother now has custody of Josiah, are you aware or do you suspect there's been any abuse perpetrated against your grandson in the care of him and his mother?
Well, I just...
The father's mother, not not your daughter.
Okay. In my heart, I don't believe that the paternal grandmother would abuse him.
Okay.
But the father, yes. The father has been very abusive. And he does have a lot of control over her because the little short time that I was around him and I kind of got to meet his mom, I never really knew her. I saw that she was being controlled when she would say things like, well, I don't know, it's up to my son Brian if, you know, you come over. It was just real strange to me that he had that much control, and yet he had never established paternity.
Right. And it's not uncommon that at times generally in abusive situations, you'll see behind an abusive person that usually they have a parent that does enable them, and they will give that person control over the situation, and they're very easily able to say, oh, it's not my decision, because they don't want the confrontation.
Okay.
So that's a lot of times the case. Lastly, we only have a couple minutes left, but I just want to ask you, is there anything that you would like to say to your grandson, either now or, you know, when he's old enough and may come across this, you know,
Yes.
this video, you can look right at that camera and say anything you want to him.
And I would love for him to know that the fight that I put up for him, and I would want him to always know how much his grandmother loved him. And I love him now, and I would never desert him. he feels like I've deserted him because he doesn't know where I'm at. I'm not allowed to see him. And therefore I just can imagine what's going through his head, because he had begged them, protective services, the adoption agency, and he was only 3,
Yes.
asking for his grandma. And then he would beg him, can I leave with my grandma when I would come to see him? He would take my hand and show them that he loved me and he was bonded. And so I want him to know that his grandma has never given up on him, and I never will.
He will know that. Thank you very much for
Yes.
taking the time to come and, talk to us and talk to your grandson Josiah, who will one day see everything that you've done.
Yes.
And thank you very much for being on the show. We
Thank you
appreciate
so much for having me. And I just want the viewers to know that there are so many of us grandparents out here and parents that are suffering because we want our family back. We want, even if we're not allowed to have them back, at least let us be bonded with our family. Let them know that they have 2 families.
Right.
They have a father family and a mother family.
Right.